Hello, this is Mac Haddo, Senior Fellow in Public Policy with the American Kratom Association. Today is Thursday, the 30th of March, and we had some great victories in the past week that are worth celebrating and reflecting upon. The states of Virginia and West Virginia became the 8th and 9th states to enact the Kratom Consumer Protection Act, a battle that we've been fighting for a long time. I express my personal thanks to each one of you who stepped up and provided your powerful personal testimonies, because those persuade lawmakers that Kratom really does help people and that it's saving lives. That's an important message that sometimes gets lost in the discussion about policy and science. Make no mistake, science is what should drive public policy. But we think that when you combine that with these testimonies, it is what moves the needle for these legislators. We can learn something from what happened in the past week, too. In the Virginia experience, we see a repeat of what happens in many legislative bodies, where lawmakers are generally very cautious and want to take an incremental approach to a regulatory scheme governing any product. Same is true that was true in Virginia, in Colorado, Georgia, Arizona, Nevada, and others. For example, in the state of Virginia, or the Commonwealth of Virginia, I should say, an interim study will be done to see what additional guardrails need to be put into place. We saw the same thing attempted this year in Colorado, where we wanted to work with the Department of Revenue and the governor's office to make certain that appropriate regulatory guardrails were in place to protect the citizens of Colorado. That effort failed because the regulators overreached. They wanted the most onerous kinds of regulations that simply did not fit the Kratom marketplace. They did fit the cannabis marketplace, where they've had some experience, and so they relied too heavily upon that kind of a regulatory scheme. We're glad that that regulatory scheme failed, but we do know that there are additional protections needed for consumers in the state of Colorado, and we're going to continue to work on that. We will do so in Virginia and in some other states where we see that additional changes are required in order to achieve the goals that we share. In West Virginia, it was a completely different experience. We started with a very fierce advocate who wanted to ban Kratom. First time West Virginia senator who came to the table with an extensive legal background, having served as a U.S. attorney, who had seen firsthand the havoc that's created in people's lives by drugs. And he attributed those kinds of experiences to Kratom consumers, inappropriately so, but yet he was passionate about his belief. That ban that would have been put into effect obviously influenced the final legislative product. So in this case, we have to unwind some of the provisions of that bill as experience is gained in West Virginia. It does have an important part of the bill, some framework for consumer protections that we fully support. But in many respects, this legislation reached back to the policies of the failed drug war in the United States in terms of penalties, including, unfortunately, the criminalization of just the possession of Kratom. You can't make much of an argument for that when you look at the fact that Kratom is not a controlled substance, that Kratom is not a harmful substance when used responsibly. And if we're going to start banning products or imposing penalties on people who possess those products because someone else irresponsibly used them, that's a path that is fraught with all kinds of problems. So we're going to work in the coming year with regulators and legislators in the state of West Virginia to help increase the understanding and hopefully make important changes to that bill next year. But we're glad that we have the first step in place that protects consumers in the state of West Virginia from adulterated products and poorly formulated products. Our next steps. We have many states where we continue to fight for the Kratom Consumer Protection Act, and we're making progress. Unfortunately, our opponents, who are driven by highly emotional kinds of messaging, are being funded by deep pocket, financially motivated trial lawyers. We can't change that. It's a free country. We certainly can't change the passion that some families feel where they believe that their loved one passed away because of the use of Kratom. We understand that it's hard in those situations to take an objective look at what science tells us and what the actual consuming experience tells us about deaths that are associated with any substance. It is unsurprising that kratom would show up in a tox screen of an individual who may be struggling with some drug addiction and trying to wean off of that drug as the scientific evidence documents takes place, and is the basis for the National Institute on Drug Abuse not only funding additional research into kratom, but full-throatedly telling people in the highest levels of our government that kratom is actually being used by people to save their lives when they're struggling with these kinds of addictions. So the fact that it pops on a talk screen, not surprising, but that doesn't say anything to the family members who have lost their loved ones, and we have to be respectful of the fact that they feel so passionately about them. But all of us have to be accountable to the science and to the actual experience of responsible use of any consumer product, including kratom. What we have to do is to unite and reach deeper, because this well-funded, trial attorney motivated campaign to ban kratom is really about enriching these lawyers, about their finding additional lawsuits and the basis in law to file lawsuits. And that's why they're so active in the legislative space. We have to simply continue to work with those states where the Kratom Consumer Protection Act is still available for passage this year. And we have to continue to oppose the bans that are being proposed, largely motivated not by science, but by the emotionally driven and deep pockets of those trial attorneys. So everyone should watch for our alerts. Unfortunately, in the legislative process, we often only receive notices a day or two before a hearing is actually scheduled. That requires a couple of things. We have to scramble at the AKA to find flights to get to those locations in order to provide testimony. We work hard on doing that. And secondly, we have to alert each of you as to these hearings and what you can do, both in terms of sending your messages or participating personally. I know it's hard. I know that you are taken from your daily routine where you have family obligations and work obligations, and it's a real sacrifice to do this. But we continue to urge you to do so, because we don't win on science alone. It takes that science being coupled with the personal and powerful testimonies of the kratom consuming public in order to let these legislators understand fully how kratom has changed your life. The winning formula is science and personal testimonies. Attacking our opponents does not work. It won't work. And it will rebound against us if we get too personal in these kinds of attacks. We don't want people to become victims of this legislative activity. We want them to become partners with us. And I think the opportunity is available because many of these families who have lost loved ones share the belief that there should not be adulterated kratom products in the marketplace. Let's find ways to cooperate and to get good public policy enacted. So thank you again to each one of you who have made these enormous sacrifices to help us achieve these victories. We're going to have more, but it's only going to become through responsible and active advocacy that we all make. We're going to win if we continue to follow that formula. We look forward to working with each one of you in the coming months as we close out the legislative session for 2023. There are just a few states that actually meet year-round, and we're going to continue to work on those as well. But stay tuned for these legislative alerts that we will send out to have you help us in the states where we're still active. Thanks again to all of you.